welcome back to Real Talk Cinema. Today we're diving into a movie that was once dismissed as a dumb comedy, but over time it started to look more like a terrifying prophecy. Released in 2006, Idiocracy is a sci-fi satire that imagines a future where intelligence has all but vanished, corporations rule everything, and the dumbest people run the world. Sound familiar? Directed by Mike Judge, the mind behind Office Space and Beavis and Butthead, this film was way ahead of its time. So buckle up as we explore how a forgotten military experiment led to the rise of President Camacho, a world addicted to Brondo, and why Idiocracy might be the smartest dumb movie ever made. Let's break it all down. The film opens not with action, but with irony and a sobering truth dressed in absurd comedy. We hear a calm, documentary-style voiceover, the kind you'd expect in a nature film or a high school science video. But what it's saying is anything but comforting. It tells us that once humanity evolved through natural selection, survival of the fittest, intelligence, strength, adaptability, these were the traits that helped the species advance. But somewhere along the line, that system began to unravel. Progress didn't slow down, it reversed. On screen, we see two contrasting families. First, a well-educated, successful couple articulate, cautious, planning every step of their lives. They speak of careers, finances, fertility treatments, and waiting for the right time to have children. But that time never comes. Life moves on. Excuses pile up. Tragedies hit. Eventually, they grow old, childless, and fade away their intelligence, their ambition, their potential, buried with them. Then we're shown the opposite end of the gene pool, a chaotic, unfiltered parade of impulsive characters. Unbothered by responsibility, education, or consequences, they multiply rapidly, haphazardly. There's no planning, just action. And lots of kids. Generation after generation, they reproduce unchecked, louder, cruder, and less thoughtful each time. The narrator doesn't scold, he observes. And through that voice, Idiocracy delivers one of its most chilling ideas. Evolution does not necessarily reward intelligence. It rewards those who reproduce. And in this dystopian vision of the future, the thoughtful were outbred by the thoughtless. What begins as a joke starts to feel eerily plausible. The world doesn't collapse overnight. It dumbs down, slowly, year by year, one loud laugh track at a time. And by the time we realize what's happening, it's already too late. That's the premise. Idiocracy builds its universe upon a society that didn't fall from the sky, but from centuries of neglect, distraction, and misplaced values. It's dark, it's funny, but above all, it's disturbingly familiar. After setting the stage for a future built on anti-intellectual decay, the film introduces our unlikely protagonist, Joe Bowers, played by Luke Wilson. Joe isn't a hero. He's not a genius, a soldier of fortune, or even particularly ambitious. In fact, he's something rarer than all of those completely average. Average IQ, average fitness, average job performance. A man so statistically unremarkable, he practically disappears into the background of life. He works at an army-based library, not as a librarian, but as a guy who sits behind a desk watching time pass. He has no strong opinions, no lofty goals. He simply exists unnoticed, uninspired, and ironically, ideal for an experiment that no one will remember. And that's exactly why he's chosen. The military, in its infinite wisdom, is secretly developing a hibernation program, a way to free soldiers for future wars. But they need a test subject, someone with no family, no ambition, and no complications. Joe fits the bill like a glove. In the words of the narrator, the human equivalent of an average Joe. Alongside him, they recruit a woman named Rita, played by Rudolph, a street-smart prostitute enlisted through a shady side deal with her pimp, Upgrade. She too is expendable, invisible, and unlikely to be missed. So the two of them are placed inside futuristic-looking hibernation pods. The plan is simple. Freeze them for a year, wake them up, and collect the data. Easy. But as Idiocracy has already shown us, the best-laid plans rarely survive contact with reality. The officer in charge of the project is arrested for running side hustles with Rita's pimp, and with his fall, the entire program is forgotten. Literally, locked away in a military storage unit beneath a mountain of trash like forgotten leftovers in a fridge that's never opened again. Joe closes his eyes in 2005 and unknowingly begins a 500-year journey into the future. To complete the human trial, the military needs a female candidate. But instead of recruiting through standard channels, the experiment takes a turn down a darker, more absurd alley, quite literally. Enter Rita, played by Rudolph, a sharp-witted, self-aware prostitute from the city streets. Recruited not for her scientific qualifications, but through a backdoor deal made by Officer Collins, the shady, opportunistic man running the experiment. He doesn't go through official paperwork. He contacts Rita's pimp, a larger-than-life figure hilariously named Upgrade, with 2 Ds for a double dose of pimping, and borrows her for the project, promising it's just temporary. Rita doesn't buy it, not really, but Upgrade reassures her, promising he'll be back to collect, always scheming, always lying. The setup couldn't be more absurd: a perfectly average man and a reluctant sex worker, chosen not for brilliance but for how little they'll be missed. They're placed into hibernation pods, sealed inside a top-secret bunker beneath the base, and left to sleep for 1 year. That was the plan. But in true Idiocracy fashion, reality intervenes. Officer Collins, the mastermind of the project, is arrested shortly after for his backdoor dealings, illegal arrangements, and general incompetence. With his disappearance, so too vanishes any memory of the experiment. Joe and Rita are forgotten. The base is shut down. Time marches on. Buildings collapse. Trash piles up. And somewhere in the ruins of what was once a government lab, 2 pods continue to hum quietly, preserving Joe and Rita through the rise and fall of a civilization. This is where satire begins to blend with dystopia. The people who shouldn't have been chosen by the people least qualified to run the show. A metaphor subtle but sharp for a system that forgets its own mistakes and buries the evidence beneath layers of neglect. And beneath it all, Joe and Rita keep sleeping for 500 years. The experiment that was supposed to last 1 year unravels almost immediately. Shortly after placing Joe and Rita into their hibernation pods, Officer Collins, the architect of the project, and the man behind Rita's shady recruitment, is arrested. Not for scientific misconduct, but for running side hustles with Rita's pimp, Upgrade, and generally being the kind of person who should never be in charge of anything. With Collins gone, the project has no advocate, no records properly filed, no oversight, and most crucially, no one left who even remembers it exists. The military base is decommissioned, repurposed, and eventually abandoned. Over time, civilization shifts, and so does the land around it. Joe and Rita, sealed inside their metal coffins of suspended animation, are left behind, entombed beneath a growing avalanche of junk. As the years pass, the world above becomes louder, dumber, and more chaotic. Institutions collapse, intelligence declines, and the surface of the earth transforms into a sea of filth, mindless entertainment, and corporate nonsense. And still, the pods remain. What began as a short-term scientific endeavor becomes an unintentional time capsule. For 500 years, Joe and Rita are forgotten as everything around them decays. Nobody came to check. Nobody even remembered to look. The 2 most important people in the future were completely overlooked in the past. This moment, quiet, slow, and entirely unnoticed by the world, is Idiocracy's most subtle warning. Not everything ends in fire and fury. Sometimes, civilizations rot from neglect. 500 years later. The world has changed not through nuclear war, alien invasion, or killer AI, but through something far more mundane and far more terrifying. Humanity got dumber. Centuries of anti-intellectualism, mindless consumerism, and the glorification of stupidity have left the earth in ruins. Skyscrapers sag under the weight of digital billboards. Trash mountains stretch across the landscape like man-made mountain ranges. Cities are overrun by advertisements, fast food chains, and a population so uneducated they water their crops with energy drinks because it's got electrolytes. This is the world of 2505, a future where evolution didn't favor the fittest, but the loudest and laziest. And in the middle of a garbage avalanche triggered by a literal landslide of centuries-old waste, Joe Bauer's hibernation pod bursts open. Groggy, confused, and still dressed in his military-issued sleepwear, Joe wakes up surrounded by broken toilets, soda cans, and television debris. He stumbles out of the wreckage and into a cityscape that looks more like a theme park run by toddlers than a functioning society. People walk around glued to screens strapped to their faces. Cars are driven like bumper carts. The language has devolved into a broken, slang-riddled mess, part English, part grunts, part internet comment section. Everywhere he looks, Joe is met with confusion, indifference, or hostility. No one understands him not because he's complex, but because he speaks clearly. And here lies the brilliant twist. In a world where intelligence has bottomed out, Joe, the most average man in 2005, is now the smartest person on the planet. He doesn't know it yet, but his journey is about to collide with a society so dysfunctional it believes Gatorade is better than water, Costco has its own zip code, and the president is a former pro wrestler with machine guns strapped to his chest. Joe didn't ask to be here. He certainly didn't plan to save humanity. But in a future this stupid, all you need to be is slightly aware to become a god. Joe stumbles through this strange, crumbling world, still disoriented from hibernation, but it doesn't take him long to realize something is deeply wrong. Everything looks like a parody of itself. Skyscrapers are stitched together with duct tape and advertising banners. Streets are lined with vending machines, fast food joints, and massive neon signs flashing slogans like, "Why you so hungry, dummy?" The language is barely English, a garbled mix of grunts, slang, and catchphrases pulled straight from decades of lowbrow marketing. The most jarring realization? The world is no longer governed by governments, it's ruled by corporations. Everything is branded. Hospitals are sponsored by fast food. Schools are owned by entertainment companies. Even the basic necessities, food, shelter, and medicine, are distributed by businesses with no expertise, just profit margins. Logic and science have been replaced by advertising and superstition. Joe, once considered totally average, now stands out like a university professor in a daycare. People stare at him like he's insane, not because he's saying anything complex, but because he uses complete sentences and asks questions that no one has answers for. He goes to a hospital seeking help, only to find doctors who barely understand anatomy and diagnose illnesses using cartoon buttons. They scan his face, don't recognize his barcode because he doesn't have one, and immediately assume he's an unscannable retard. He tries to explain where he's from, that he was frozen for 500 years, but his story, no matter how calmly told, is too smart for anyone to comprehend. To them, he's not a time traveler. He's a criminal, an outcast, a threat. So, within minutes of arriving in the future, Joe Bowers is arrested for not having the proper ID tattoo, for speaking too intelligently, and for asking too many questions. In 2505, that's all it takes to be labeled dangerous. What began as a military experiment has now dropped Joe into the heart of a corporate dystopia, a place where ignorance isn't just common, it's celebrated. After wandering through a world of garbage, gibberish, and Gatorade-soaked agriculture, Joe's fate takes a sharp turn. He's arrested not for any real crime, but for simply not having a barcode tattoo on his arm. In 2505, that barcode is everything: ID, credit, citizenship, and legal proof that you exist. Without it, Joe is officially a nobody, or worse, a criminal. Dragged away by incompetent police officers in Crocs and armor made from padding and duct tape, Joe is taken to what's supposed to be a courthouse, but it looks more like a pro wrestling arena with a judge's bench and a crowd cheering like it's Monday Night SmackDown. This is the future's version of justice: loud, chaotic, and terrifyingly stupid. He's told to take a lawyer, who turns out to be Frito Pendejo, a slouchy, half-conscious guy with more interest in his snacks than legal defense. Frito is too lazy to listen and too dumb to understand Joe's case. He literally falls asleep during the trial. Joe pleads for understanding. He tries to explain who he is, how he got here, and what's gone wrong. But every sentence he speaks calm, rational, articulate is used against him. The crowd boos him for talking all smart, and the judge squints like Joe's IQ is a personal insult. The court doesn't want justice, it wants entertainment. The verdict is predetermined. Joe is guilty of not having a tattoo, of not watching enough TV, of sounding like a fag, as one character bluntly puts it in the film's satirical jab at political incorrectness gone feral. His sentence? Rehabilitation, which in this society means being sent to prison and thrown into a violent televised demolition derby called the Rehabilitation Arena. Justice and Idiocracy is a joke and Joe is the punchline. But what the world doesn't know is that it just sentenced the smartest man alive to the one thing it fears most, a chance to think. Thrown into the chaotic justice system of 2505, Joe is handed a lawyer, Frito Pendejo, played by Dax Shepard, and calling Frito a lawyer is generous at best. Frito is the living embodiment of the world's decline, lazy, unmotivated, and profoundly clueless. He shows up late, barely awake, and more interested in munching on snacks than defending Joe's case. His idea of legal strategy? Avoiding work at all costs and hoping things sort themselves out. At first, Joe sees Frito as an obstacle, a dumb sidekick who's only making things worse. But as the trial devolves into absurdity, Joe quickly realizes that Frito, flawed as he is, might be his only chance to survive in this insane new world. Frito doesn't just represent Joe in court. He becomes his reluctant guide to the bizarre customs, twisted logic, and corporate-controlled chaos that define the future. Together, these two mismatched characters form an unlikely partnership. Joe, the surprisingly intelligent man out of time, and Frito, the embodiment of dumb luck and stubborn survival. Their dynamic is equal parts frustrating and funny, with Frito's ignorance providing comic relief, and Joe's confusion highlighting just how far society has fallen. Frito may be an idiot, but in this world, that's almost an asset. As Joe navigates this new world, one of the most bizarre and striking revelations hits him early on. Water, the very essence of life, no longer matters. In its place, the planet is drenched, irrigated, and fueled by Brondo, a bright green neon sports drink packed with electrolytes, caffeine, and sugar. It's everywhere. It's in the fields, it's in the taps, it's the liquid of choice for every conceivable use, from drinking, to watering crops, to cooling engines. Joe watches in disbelief as farmers douse their parched plants with Brondo, convinced it's superior to water because, as the endless commercials hammer home, it's got electrolytes. But the crops die, the soil withers, and the people keep guzzling the fizzy, nutrient-empty liquid, blissfully ignorant. This substitution is a perfect symbol of the world's collapse, a future where marketing trumps science and ignorance masquerades as innovation. It's a society so addicted to convenience and brand loyalty that it has forgotten the basics of survival. For Joe, who remembers a time when water was sacred and science mattered, this is just another layer of absurdity in a world gone mad. Brondo isn't just a drink, it's a symptom of a civilization drowning in its own stupidity. Sentenced to prison for his crimes, mainly for lacking a barcode and talking too much, Joe finds himself trapped in a place as absurd as the world outside. But in a society where common sense has been replaced by ignorance, Joe's average reasoning becomes a form of brilliance. While the other inmates bumble through chaos and violence, Joe looks for simple solutions, things that made perfect sense to him in 2005 but seem revolutionary in 2505. He notices the guards' routines, the weak spots in the prison's outdated security, and the inmates' predictable behavior. Using clear logic and calm observation, Joe quickly devises a plan. Where others see confusion, Joe sees opportunity. Where others panic, he stays calm. And then, with a mixture of straightforward thinking and a bit of luck, he breaks out. To everyone watching, guards, inmates, and citizens alike, Joe's escape isn't just a breakout, it's a stroke of genius. The average guy who couldn't even get a barcode tattoo has outsmarted an entire prison system built on stupidity and neglect. His simple act of survival plants the first seed of hope and danger in this dumbed-down dystopia. One of the most disorienting shocks for Joe is not just how dumb people have become, but how their language has devolved into a nearly unrecognizable dialect of English. On the surface, everyone still speaks English, but it's a broken, mangled version riddled with slang, gibberish, and guttural sounds that resemble the chatter of toddlers more than adults. Sentences are stripped of grammar, replaced with catchphrases and buzzwords like Brondo, I'm smart, and ow my balls. Conversations jump wildly from topic to topic, with people often responding to questions they didn't hear or understand. Joe's attempts to communicate are met with blank stares, confused grunts, or worse, outright hostility. His clear, articulate speech is seen as suspicious, alien, or simply too complicated for the average citizen to process. This language barrier deepens Joe's isolation, making his struggle not just one of intellect, but of connection. He's a man out of time, lost in a world where even the simplest idea requires translation. The film uses this degradation of language as a powerful symbol of cultural decline, showing how intelligence isn't just about knowledge, but about communication, empathy, and understanding. In 2505, even language itself has been dumbed down, and Joe is the last fluent speaker of a dying tongue. In a world that has traded wisdom for spectacle. The highest office is held by none other than President Dwayne Elizondo Mountain Dew Herbert Camacho, played with electrifying charisma by Terry Crews. Camacho is the perfect symbol of this dystopia's absurdity. A former professional wrestler turned porn star turned politician, ruling the country with bravado, muscle, and an endless supply of catchphrases. He's loud, bombastic, and utterly unqualified, yet wildly popular in a society that values entertainment over expertise. Faced with a crumbling economy and the devastating effects of a vast dust bowl choking the land, Camacho is desperate for a solution. Enter Joe Bowers, the stranger from the past, who speaks clearly, thinks logically, and actually seems to understand how things work. In a move that shocks everyone, including Joe, President Camacho appoints him Secretary of the Interior, handing him the near impossible task of fixing the environment and reviving the failing economy. Joe is thrust from prisoner to policymaker overnight, a fish out of water, with a mission that seems doomed from the start. But what Joe brings to the table is exactly what this society has lost: common sense, reason, and a basic understanding of science. As he steps into this role, Joe must navigate a government that's as dysfunctional as the citizens it serves, while confronting the deep-rooted stupidity that threatens to bury the country literally under layers of dust and decay. It's a monumental challenge, but in a world this dumb, even small intelligence feels like a revolution. As Secretary of the Interior, Joe dives headfirst into the disaster that is the country's agriculture. The once fertile fields have turned into barren wastelands, crops shriveled and dying under a relentless dust bowl. Digging into the problem, Joe uncovers a shocking truth. The farmers have been irrigating their fields not with water, but with Brondo, the neon green energy drink packed with electrolytes and caffeine. To Joe, this is absurd. To everyone else, it's gospel. After all, the marketing slogan, "It's got electrolytes," has convinced the masses that Brondo is superior to water for everything, even growing food. Armed with this simple but radical insight, Joe boldly recommends a revolutionary idea: stop using Brondo on the crops and switch back to water. The reaction is explosive. In a society starved for common sense, this suggestion sounds like heresy. The media erupts in confusion. Corporations push back hard. After all, Brondo is a multi-billion-dollar empire with massive influence. Citizens, addicted to slogans and instant gratification, can't comprehend the concept. Water? That's just boring juice, they shout. Protesters wield Brondo cans like weapons. But Joe stands firm. He explains the science in as simple terms as possible about photosynthesis, hydration, and the basics of plant life. Slowly, the idea takes hold. It's a small victory against a backdrop of ignorance, but in this world, it's a revolution. Joe Bowers, the once average Joe, becomes a symbol of hope and reason in a society that's forgotten both. Despite Joe's earnest efforts to save the dying crops, patience is a scarce commodity in a society addicted to instant results. Days pass with no visible change. The public's frustration boils over, fueled by media frenzy and corporate propaganda from the powerful Brondo conglomerate. Blaming Joe for the ongoing disaster, the government quickly turns on him, and in a brutal display of their justice, Joe is sentenced to death, accused of sabotage and treason against the Brondo way. As he faces his execution, the tension is palpable. The crowd is divided, some jeering, some fearful, but all caught in the grip of this spectacle. Then, in a dramatic twist, just moments before the execution, green shoots begin to sprout in the parched fields. The crops nurtured by water instead of Brondo start to thrive. The impossible has happened. Joe's simple common sense solution is vindicated. From condemned prisoner to celebrated savior, Joe's rise is meteoric. The same people who condemned him now hail him as a hero, a beacon of reason and hope in a world drowning in stupidity. His victory is more than agricultural. It's a triumph of intellect over ignorance, of logic over chaos. But the question remains, can one average man really change a society so deeply broken? Behind the scenes facts. Fun trivia. Against all odds, Joe Bauer's journey from forgotten experiment to reluctant hero culminates in the highest office. He becomes President of the United States, a beacon of reason in a world buried beneath layers of idiocy. Alongside him is Rita, the fierce and street-smart woman who survived the same hibernation ordeal, now his partner in both life and leadership. Together, they symbolize a new beginning. Joe's presidency doesn't instantly fix everything. The world is still a chaotic mess of consumerism, laziness, and ignorance. But his steady common-sense approach plants a glimmer of hope. Through patience, persistence, and a reminder that intelligence isn't elitism, it's survival, Joe begins to rebuild a foundation for a better future. Idiocracy ends on a note that's part satire, part cautionary tale, and part call to action. Even the most average among us can spark change. In a world that's lost its way, sometimes simple intelligence and human decency are the greatest revolutions of all. The genius behind Idiocracy, director and writer Mike Judge, conceived the film's premise during a frustrating moment stuck in traffic. As he sat watching the world move slowly around him, Judge began to notice a troubling pattern. Society seemed to reward stupidity and ignorance, while penalizing intelligence and critical thinking. This everyday observation sparked a provocative question in his mind. What if, over generations, this trend continued unchecked? What kind of world would we end up with? From that simple spark, Idiocracy was born as sharp satire that imagines a future where anti-intellectualism reigns supreme and common sense has all but vanished. Judge's unique blend of humor and social commentary turned a traffic jam into a cautionary tale about the dangers of complacency and the value of intelligence. The film's darkly comic vision serves as a mirror, reflecting the absurdities and pitfalls of contemporary culture back at us all, inspired by a single moment of frustration in rush hour. Before settling on the now iconic title Idiocracy, the film was originally called The United States of America. This early title perfectly captured the film's satirical spirit, a playful jab at a dumbed-down America, where even the country's name is slurred and simplified. The United States of America embodied the film's core idea, a nation lost in its own ignorance, stumbling through history with more confusion than clarity. While the title eventually changed to Idiocracy for its punch and clarity, the original name remains a quirky reminder of the film's comedic roots and biting social commentary. Idiocracy was filmed in 2004, a sharp and unapologetic satire that boldly took aim at consumer culture, corporate greed, and the erosion of intelligence in modern society. Yet, despite its biting humor and unique premise, the film didn't hit theaters until 2006, spending nearly 2 years languishing on the studio's shelf. Why the delay? The answer lies in the very heart of Idiocracy's critique. The film's relentless corporate satire made studio executives deeply uncomfortable. Its portrayal of a future dominated by giant corporations, particularly the fictional Brondo company, a thinly veiled jab at real-life marketing excess, was a mirror too harsh for Hollywood's own backyards. The studios feared the movie might alienate audiences, upset powerful advertisers, or simply be too controversial for mass appeal. This hesitation reflected a broader cultural tension. A movie that skewered the very forces that fund and promote much of the entertainment industry was a risky proposition. So, Idiocracy was shelved, quietly waiting while other, safer projects took priority. This delay ironically echoed the movie's themes, the triumph of complacency and caution over bold ideas and critical thinking. But when Idiocracy finally premiered in 2006, it found an audience hungry for its fearless satire. Over time, the film became a cult classic, celebrated for its sharp wit, prescient commentary, and unapologetic humor. Its journey from shelving to cult status is a testament to how groundbreaking art often faces resistance before it is truly appreciated. In the end, Idiocracy wasn't just a movie about a dumbed-down future. Its own history is a reminder of how difficult it can be to confront uncomfortable truths, especially when those truths hit too close to home. Despite its sharp wit and biting social commentary, Idiocracy faced a harsh reality beyond the studio's initial hesitation. Fox, the film's distributor, refused to promote it. After sitting on the shelf for nearly 2 years, Idiocracy was finally released in 2006, but with almost no fanfare. The studio gave it an extremely limited theatrical run, opening in just 125 theaters nationwide. What's more, Fox chose to invest $0 in marketing or advertising. No trailers, no TV spots, no promotional campaigns. The film was essentially released into the wild with little more than a whisper. This silence was telling. Fox's lack of support echoed the film's own critique of corporate priorities and fear of controversy. Without the backing of a strong promotional push, Idiocracy struggled to find its audience in theaters. Its box office performance was modest at best, a far cry from what it might have achieved with proper marketing. Yet, this quiet release didn't stop the film from resonating with viewers. Through word of mouth, DVD releases, and later streaming, Idiocracy found a growing cult following. Fans embraced its clever satire, seeing in it a prescient warning about society's trajectory. In many ways, Fox's refusal to champion Idiocracy only added to its mystique, turning it into a hidden gem, discovered and cherished by those willing to seek it out. The film's underdog journey mirrors its story, overlooked by the mainstream, but impossible to ignore once seen. Idiocracy doesn't just poke fun at society, it pulls no punches when it comes to skewering major corporations that dominate American culture. Throughout the film, recognizable brands like Starbucks, Costco, Carl's Jr., and Fuddruckers are portrayed in exaggerated satirical ways that highlight the mindless consumerism and corporate overreach fueling the dystopia. Starbucks, for example, is mocked as a symbol of overpriced luxury and superficial trends, while Costco represents the overwhelming glut of junk food and useless products flooding the shelves. Carl's Jr. and Fuddruckers are depicted as purveyors of greasy, unhealthy fast food, part of the endless cycle of instant gratification and poor choices. This sharp satire reportedly didn't sit well with the companies themselves. Rumors swirled that executives from these corporations were unhappy with their portrayals, feeling the film hit a little too close to home. The movie's fearless critique of consumer culture and corporate power was a bold, risky move, one that likely contributed to studio hesitancy and the film's delayed release. But this biting humor is precisely what has helped Idiocracy endure, resonating with audiences who see the film as a truthful, if exaggerated, reflection of real-world trends. By lampooning these household names, Idiocracy holds up a mirror to the excesses and absurdities of modern capitalism, showing how big business and shallow consumer habits can shape society in troubling ways. One of the most striking aspects of Idiocracy's visual storytelling is its authentic portrayal of a world that has not only declined intellectually but also materially. To capture this sense of decay and neglect, the film's production team took a resourceful, almost guerrilla approach to costumes and set design. Many of the outfits worn by the characters were crafted from reused junk, thrift store finds, and everyday dollar store items, reflecting a society that has lost its sophistication and settled for cheap disposable goods. Props and set pieces mirrored this aesthetic trash piled high in the streets, makeshift buildings patched together from scrap, and advertisements plastered on battered walls with faded colors. This creative choice wasn't just a budgetary constraint, it was a deliberate artistic decision to visually reinforce the film's themes of degradation and decay. By using discarded materials, the filmmakers grounded their satirical world in something tangible and relatable, a future that feels disturbingly plausible, where consumerism's waste has piled up and quality has plummeted. The end result is a richly textured environment that immerses the viewer in the dystopia, making the satire hit even harder. In a way, the very garbage and discarded trinkets used in the film's creation became a symbol of the intellectual and cultural rubbish Idiocracy warns against. One of the most unsettling yet hilarious elements of Idiocracy is its portrayal of language in a future America on the verge of collapse. The film's characters don't simply speak English, they communicate in a bizarre, fractured dialect that's a chaotic mashup of internet slang, ebonics, and primal grunts. This linguistic stew is carefully crafted to feel both familiar and alien, like a language that's evolving backwards, losing complexity and clarity with every generation. Words are shortened, mispronounced, and mixed with nonsensical sounds, creating dialogue that sounds like English spoken through a fog of confusion and intellectual decay. This creative choice wasn't just for laughs. It's a poignant commentary on how language, a cornerstone of culture and intelligence, can deteriorate when critical thinking and education are neglected. By imagining a future where communication is reduced to its most basic broken form, Idiocracy highlights how crucial language is to understanding, cooperation, and progress. The film's slang is more than just gibberish, it's a warning about what happens when society stops valuing clear thought and meaningful expression. Here's a storytelling style behind the scenes fact for Real Talk Cinema about Brondo's real life legacy. One of Idiocracy's most memorable inventions is the fictional sports drink Brondo, the Thirst Mutilator. In the film's dystopian future, Brondo is everywhere the all-purpose beverage that's used not only for drinking, but shockingly, also for watering crops and powering machines. Its absurd ubiquity and the hilarious tagline made Brondo an instant icon among fans, symbolizing the film's satire of mindless consumerism and corporate dominance. So powerful was the fan enthusiasm that, years after the film's release, a real-life version of Brondo was actually created and sold as an energy drink. This rare case of fiction spilling into reality showed just how much Idiocracy's quirky world resonated beyond the screen. The real Brondo capitalized on the film's cult status with branding, flavors, and marketing that leaned into the humor and satire that made the original so beloved. It's a perfect example of how Idiocracy's sharp satire and imaginative world-building continue to influence culture, blurring the line between parody and real life. One of the key elements that make Idiocracy so effective is Luke Wilson's intentionally deadpan performance as Joe Bowers. In a world gone completely mad, flooded with absurdity, chaos, and rampant stupidity, Wilson's calm, unflappable demeanor serves as the perfect anchor. He plays the quintessential straight man, reacting to the insanity around him with a quiet bewilderment and sincere common sense. This contrast isn't accidental, it's a deliberate choice by director Mike Judge to highlight just how out of place Joe is in this dystopian society. Wilson's subtle expressions and measured tone make Joe's average intelligence feel like genius, and his every line carries the weight of reason in a world drowning in nonsense. Through Wilson's grounded portrayal, audiences can connect emotionally to Joe's journey, feeling his frustration, confusion, and hope, even as the world around him spirals into comedic chaos. It's this balance between calm and crazy that elevates Idiocracy from simple comedy to sharp social satire. One of the standout performances in Idiocracy comes from Terry Crews as the larger-than-life President Camacho, an ex-wrestler and former porn star who rules the dystopian America with loud bravado and ridiculous confidence. What really made Camacho unforgettable was Crews' knack for improvisation. Much of his character's outrageous dialogue wasn't scripted. Terry Crews brought his own high-energy personality to the role, improvising lines on the spot and adding spontaneous bursts of humor and unpredictability. This improvisational style gave Camacho an even wilder, more chaotic edge, perfectly fitting the film's absurd world. His improvised rants, catchphrases, and over-the-top speeches created some of the most memorable and quotable moments in the movie, turning Camacho into a cult icon. Crews' natural charisma and fearless comedy helped breathe life into a character that could have easily become a simple caricature. Instead, President Camacho remains one of Idiocracy's most entertaining and hilarious highlights, a testament to the power of improvisation in comedy. Idiocracy isn't just a comedy, it's a sharp, unsettling prophecy wrapped in satire. Long before many of today's cultural trends fully emerged, the film eerily predicted a series of societal shifts that now feel all too familiar. It foresaw America's obsession with reality TV, a culture where fame is divorced from talent or achievement, and entertainment often celebrates the shallow and sensational. The movie also spotlighted the decline in education and critical thinking, imagining a future where intellectual curiosity has been replaced by laziness and anti-intellectualism. Corporate dominance looms large. Too, the film's portrayal of giant brands controlling everything from food to water echoes real-world concerns about monopolies and the commodification of daily life. Finally, Idiocracy touched on the rise of populist politics with charismatic but unqualified leaders like President Camacho, who ruled through spectacle, bravado, and superficial appeal rather than substance. What makes these predictions so striking is how much they resonate with today's headlines and cultural conversations. Idiocracy remains a cautionary tale, warning us about where society might head if we ignore the importance of education, critical thinking, and responsible leadership. It's comedy with a sharp bite, one that challenges viewers to reflect on the world around them and consider what kind of future they want to create. Despite Idiocracy's sprawling satire and ensemble cast, one standout performance came from Maya Rudolph, who parts in just a few days. This tight schedule could have been a major challenge, especially given the complexity of her character, who needed to balance street smarts, humor, and emotional depth. Yet, Rudolph rose to the occasion with professionalism and skill, delivering a performance that added a crucial dynamic to the film. Her ability to convey resilience and wit in such a compressed time frame helped ground the story and gave Joe Bowers a strong, relatable partner in the absurd new world. Rudolph's contribution is a testament to how great acting isn't just about screen time, it's about making every moment count. Her standout performance remains one of the memorable highlights of Idiocracy, proving that even limited time on set can produce lasting impact. Idiocracy's journey to recognition was anything but smooth. When it was first released in 2006, the film barely made a splash, buried by minimal marketing and a limited theatrical run that meant few people even knew it existed. Critics were mixed, and audiences were sparse, leaving the movie to quietly fade into obscurity. But this was far from the end of Idiocracy's story. As the film hit DVD shelves and later found its way onto the internet, something remarkable happened. Viewers began to discover its sharp satire and laugh-out-loud moments, sparking conversations online and among friends. The movie's critique of anti-intellectualism, corporate culture, and political spectacle resonated deeply, especially as real-world events started to mirror its dystopian vision. Through word of mouth, streaming, and social media discussions, Idiocracy grew a devoted fan base. It became a cult classic, a film celebrated for its humor and unsettling prescience, appreciated not just for entertainment, but for its biting social commentary. Today, Idiocracy stands as a testament to how a movie can find new life long after its initial release, proving that sometimes the smartest stories take time to be understood. Though Idiocracy stumbled at the box office, its sharp insights have earned it a surprising second life in academic and cultural discussions. Today, the film is frequently featured in college courses that explore media literacy, political science, sociology, and cultural studies. Professors use it as a vivid example of satire that exposes the dangers of declining education, mass consumerism, and the manipulation of public opinion. In classrooms and seminars, Idiocracy sparks conversations about how media shapes society's values and how critical thinking can be lost in the flood of entertainment and sensationalism. Beyond academia, the film has inspired countless think pieces and essays analyzing the trajectory of modern politics, the rise of populism, and the influence of corporate power. Its dystopian vision has become a cultural touchstone, a lens through which critics and commentators examine current events and warn about potential futures. In this way, Idiocracy transcends its comedic roots to become a cautionary tale, a provocative mirror reflecting society's challenges and prompting reflection on the importance of intelligence, responsibility, and informed citizenship. Over the years, Idiocracy has transformed in the eyes of many from a quirky sci-fi satire into something far more profound, a cautionary documentary about the potential future of society. What once felt like exaggerated comedy now strikes a nerve as viewers watch real-world events echo the film's bleak predictions. From the widespread anti-intellectualism and rampant consumerism to the rise of sensationalist media and populist leadership, Idiocracy feels increasingly less like fiction and more like a mirror reflecting uncomfortable truths. Fans and critics alike often point to the film's sharp observations as eerily prophetic, giving it a renewed sense of urgency and relevance. It has become a cultural touchstone, a warning wrapped in humor, urging society to rethink its values before the satire becomes reality. In this way, Idiocracy stands as a powerful reminder. Laughter can be a tool not just for entertainment, but for awakening awareness about where we might be headed. Idiocracy paints a wildly exaggerated portrait of the future, but beneath its over-the-top humor lies a sobering critique of anti-intellectualism and cultural decay. The film takes present-day trends, declining education standards, the rise of mindless entertainment, and the glorification of ignorance, and cranks them up to an absurd extreme. This exaggeration isn't just for laughs, it's a deliberate tool to expose the dangers of a society that devalues critical thinking and wisdom. By using dark comedy, Idiocracy forces viewers to confront uncomfortable questions about where culture is headed if intellectual laziness becomes the norm. The chaotic, dumbed-down world it depicts isn't just fictional, it's a warning wrapped in satire, challenging audiences to reflect on their own role in either perpetuating or fighting against cultural decline. In this way, the film's humor cuts deeper than mere entertainment, offering a sharp, unsettling mirror of our possible future. Exactly. In Idiocracy, the exaggerated food items like FUD cups and the infamous garbage burger aren't just for comic shock, they're a biting satire on how fast food and poor nutrition have become normalized. These grotesque, processed meals symbolize a society so detached from healthy eating that junk food has replaced real nourishment entirely. The film uses these absurd foods to highlight the long-term consequences of consumer culture's obsession with convenience and taste over health. It's a sharp commentary on how easy access to unhealthy food choices can contribute to widespread health problems and a general decline in societal well-being. Absolutely. The overwhelming trash piles and urban decay in Idiocracy visually hammer home the devastating effects of unchecked consumerism and waste. The film's future world isn't just dumbed down intellectually, it's literally buried in its own garbage. Mountains of trash symbolize how society's obsession with buying, discarding, and mindless consumption spirals into environmental disaster. This dystopian backdrop is a loud warning about what happens when convenience and consumption override responsibility and sustainability. It's a stark visual reminder that the cost of consumer culture isn't just financial or cultural, it's environmental too. In Idiocracy, Joe Bowers represents an extraordinary anomaly, not because he's a genius, but precisely because he embodies ordinary common sense in a world that has utterly forgotten it. His solutions to the catastrophic problems facing the future society aren't complex or high tech. They're grounded in simple logic, basic knowledge, and practical reasoning. This contrast is striking. The society Joe wakes up to is so intellectually bankrupt that his everyday reasoning feels revolutionary. Whether it's recognizing that crops need water instead of an energy drink, or understanding that critical thinking and education are essential, Joe's common sense becomes a beacon of hope amid widespread chaos. The film uses Joe's character to emphasize how fundamental skills, basic scientific understanding, rational decision making, and simple problem solving are undervalued or even lost when anti intellectualism and complacency take over. It suggests that when society stops nurturing these foundational capacities, progress grinds to a halt and collapse follows. Joe's journey reminds viewers that intelligence isn't about flashy technology or complicated theories. Sometimes, it's about remembering the basics and applying clear, straightforward thinking to solve real problems. His role is a powerful call to action, a warning that neglecting the core principles of knowledge and logic risks pushing society toward a future where common sense becomes the rarest commodity of all. Idiocracy doesn't just portray a one-way collapse of society's intelligence. It hints at a cyclical pattern where civilization can rise and fall based on its commitment to critical thinking and education. The film's premise starts with the idea that those who don't engage their intellect reproduce more, gradually lowering the collective intelligence of future generations. But this decline isn't inevitable or permanent. Rather, it's a cycle that can repeat if vigilance is lost. This cyclical concept serves as a warning. Without active investment in knowledge, curiosity, and rational discourse, society risks slipping back into ignorance and dysfunction, no matter how advanced it once was. In essence, Idiocracy invites us to reflect on history's lessons. Empires and cultures have risen and fallen repeatedly due to similar failures to value education and reason. The film challenges viewers to break this cycle by fostering critical thinking and resisting the allure of intellectual complacency, or risk watching society spiral downward once again. In Idiocracy, the prison system has been transformed into a bizarre circus-like game show, a shocking commentary on how entertainment and punishment have dangerously blurred together. Instead of serving justice or rehabilitation, incarceration becomes a spectacle designed for mass amusement. This satirical depiction reflects real-world concerns about the sensationalism of crime in media, where punishment is often treated as entertainment rather than a serious social responsibility. The film exaggerates this trend to highlight the ethical decay when society prioritizes spectacle over justice. By turning prisons into arenas of absurd challenges and public spectacle, Idiocracy warns that when punishment is commodified and trivialized, the system loses its moral foundation. It underscores how dehumanization becomes normalized when inmates are viewed less as people and more as actors in a grotesque show. This blending of justice and entertainment serves as a powerful critique of how media consumption can distort society's perception of crime, punishment, and humanity itself. In Idiocracy, the gladiator-style arena isn't just a flashy backdrop, it symbolizes a chilling future where society is utterly obsessed with violence as entertainment. This brutal spectacle mirrors ancient Roman arenas, but is repurposed in the film to emphasize the depths to which cultural decay can sink when empathy and critical thinking disappear. By turning conflict and suffering into mass entertainment, The film critiques how desensitized people become to real pain and injustice when it's packaged as a show. The arena highlights a society numbed by constant stimulation, craving ever more extreme displays to feel engaged. This obsession reflects broader concerns about the commodification of violence in media today, from reality TV to video games and sensationalized news where the lines between entertainment and cruelty dangerously blur. Idiocracy warns that if this trend continues unchecked, violence won't just be consumed passively but celebrated actively, further eroding social bonds and humanity itself. The ending of Idiocracy strikes a delicate balance between hope and ambiguity, leaving viewers with more questions than answers about the future of the world it portrays. After all the chaos, Joe's common sense solutions finally start to take hold. Water replaces Brondo, crops begin to grow, and society starts to show signs of recovery. This moment offers a glimmer of optimism, suggesting that even in the darkest, most degenerate circumstances, intelligence and reason can spark positive change. However, the film deliberately avoids painting this turnaround as a clear victory or permanent fix. The ambiguous tone serves as a reminder that real societal progress is fragile and must be continuously nurtured. The dystopia Idiocracy presents is not a static endpoint, but a warning about the ongoing consequences of neglecting education, critical thinking, and responsibility. In this way, the film challenges audiences to consider whether we, as a society, are willing to put in the effort to break the cycle of decline, or if we are doomed to repeat it. The ending doesn't give us the comfort of certainty. It pushes us to confront our own role in shaping the future and the precariousness of hope itself. When Mike Judge first pitched Idiocracy to studios, he described it as a dark satire laced with crude humor, a bold and unapologetic critique of society's decline. This edgy tone, combined with its scathing commentary on anti-intellectualism and corporate culture, made many executives nervous. They worried the film's biting humor and controversial themes wouldn't sit well with mainstream audiences or powerful advertisers. As a result, studios hesitated to fully back the project, fearing it might alienate viewers or provoke backlash. Despite these concerns, Judge remained committed to his vision, wanting to shine a harsh light on the cultural trends he saw spiraling out of control. This tension between creative boldness and commercial caution played a big role in why Idiocracy struggled to get the support it deserved upon release. An irony given how prophetic and relevant the film has become since. One of the film's subtle yet powerful techniques to build its dystopian world was the deliberate coaching of background extras to act with exaggerated stupidity. Rather than simply portraying a crowd of confused or slow-witted people, director Mike Judge pushed actors to embody a surreal, almost cartoonish level of ignorance. This approach created a disorienting atmosphere that feels both absurd and unsettling, amplifying the movie's satire on the decline of intellect. The extras' exaggerated behavior isn't just for a comic relief. It immerses the audience in a reality where everyday interactions are marked by baffling misunderstandings and mindless chatter. This heightened portrayal makes the world of Idiocracy feel convincingly broken, reinforcing the film's message that the decay of intelligence affects every layer of society, from leadership to the very people on the streets. It's a subtle but effective choice that helps the movie maintain its unique blend of humor and sharp social commentary. One of the fascinating behind-the-scenes details about Idiocracy is how its set design cleverly used recycled props from other sci-fi films to create a deliberately mismatched and chaotic aesthetic. Instead of building a sleek, futuristic world, the filmmakers chose to piece together existing materials that looked worn out, outdated, or just plain odd. This patchwork style perfectly reflects the film's theme of societal decline, a future that's cobbled together from the leftovers of past technology and culture with no real innovation or care. The result is a visually jarring environment that feels both familiar and disturbingly off-kilter, reinforcing the idea that progress has stalled and regressed. This creative choice subtly enhances the story's satire by making the world itself feel as neglected and absurd as the people inhabiting it. It's a brilliant example of how production design can deepen a film's message beyond the script. One of the clever touches in Idiocracy lies in its use of futuristic slang and cultural references, which are peppered with Easter eggs nodding to early 2000s pop culture. While the movie is set centuries in the future, its language and customs cleverly twist and exaggerate trends from the time it was made, creating a satirical bridge between the present and a possible future. These subtle references reward attentive viewers who recognize warped versions of brands, TV shows, and social habits from the early 21st century. This technique adds a layer of depth to the film's humor, highlighting how some cultural phenomena could evolve or devolve over time. It also reminds us that the seeds of the dystopian future portrayed in Idiocracy are rooted in very familiar, contemporary behaviors, making the satire feel closer to home and all the more unsettling. Mike Judge has openly shared that Idiocracy's core message was deeply inspired by his observations of reality TV and political campaigns in the early 2000s. During that period, Judge noticed a troubling cultural shift toward valuing sensationalism, superficiality, and spectacle over substance and intellect. Reality shows, with their often manufactured drama and glorification of ignorance, alongside political campaigns that sometimes prioritized catchy slogans and entertainment value rather than meaningful policy debates, alarmed him. These trends sparked the idea that society might be headed toward a future where intelligence and critical thinking are marginalized. Judge channeled this concern into the film's satirical vision, imagining a world where these cultural dynamics have run rampant unchecked. This real-world inspiration gives Idiocracy its biting relevance and sharp edge, turning the film from pure fantasy into a provocative social commentary on the consequences of dumbing down media and politics. The soundtrack of Idiocracy plays a crucial role in immersing viewers in its dystopian world by blending an original score with futuristic, distorted versions of familiar pop songs. This creative choice heightens the film's unsettling atmosphere by taking tunes audiences recognize and warping them into strange, sometimes eerie versions that feel both alien and oddly familiar. The musical distortion mirrors the film's broader theme of cultural decay. Just as society's values and intelligence have been twisted and degraded, so too has its music. This clever audio design deepens the satirical impact by making the future world sound as broken and chaotic as it looks, reinforcing the overall sense of societal collapse and intellectual decline. It's an example of how even the soundtrack can be used thoughtfully to support the film's message and tone. Idiocracy had a notably poor theatrical release, with minimal marketing and low box office returns that left it almost overlooked by mainstream audiences at the time. However, its fortunes changed dramatically in the home entertainment market. When the film hit DVD and later streaming platforms, it found a passionate cult following that resonated deeply with its sharp satire and dark humor. This delayed appreciation highlights how some films, especially those with bold social critiques, can struggle in traditional theaters, but thrive in the long tail of digital and home viewing. The accessibility of streaming allowed Idiocracy to reach viewers who connected with its message about societal decline, giving it lasting cultural relevance far beyond its initial flop. This trajectory also underscores changing patterns in how audiences discover and embrace films outside the conventional box office model. Idiocracy sharpens its satirical blade on corporate branding, painting a future where every product aggressively pushes marketing hype over actual substance. From the ridiculous energy drink Brondo to absurdly named fast food items, the film exaggerates how consumer culture prioritizes flashy advertising and catchy slogans rather than quality or value. This relentless focus on selling and packaging over genuine usefulness reflects a society obsessed with consumption at any cost, where brand loyalty is often built on hype rather than merit. The satire exposes how marketing can manipulate desires and dull critical thinking, turning people into passive consumers more interested in the image of a product than its real benefits. In Idiocracy, this obsession with branding becomes a symptom of broader intellectual and cultural decline, where substance is sacrificed for spectacle and superficiality reigns supreme. In Idiocracy, the citizens' constant obsession with bodily functions and crude humor isn't just for shock value or laughs, it's a sharp critique of how popular culture can coarsen over time. The film exaggerates this obsession to illustrate a society that has lost its taste for subtlety, sophistication, and meaningful discourse. Jokes about flatulence, bodily fluids, and crude antics dominate everyday life, reflecting a cultural shift where the lowest common denominator becomes the default mode of communication and entertainment. This saturation of vulgar humor serves as a symptom of a broader intellectual decline, suggesting that as critical thinking erodes, so does the ability to engage in more nuanced or respectful social interaction. By portraying this crudeness as normalized and even celebrated, Idiocracy warns against a cultural trajectory that prioritizes instant gratification and base entertainment over thoughtful conversation and depth. Joe's confusion and frustration throughout Idiocracy serve as powerful symbols of the struggle of reason and logic in a world overwhelmed by ignorance and anti intellectualism. As a man out of time, Joe's attempts to navigate and fix a society